Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Geeks Reads. Today I'll talk about The Apostles of Mercy by Lindsay and Ellis, an image of which you will see here. Ooh, it's in 3D. This is the third book in the Numina series, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. There will be some warning. There will be some spoilers for the previous book, because I'm going to reference things that are introduced in that book for this book. So in the previous book, we were introduced to some new characters, a new alien who they've nicknamed Nicola, and Cave, who becomes a romantic interest of sorts for Cora. At the end of the last book, which is why I'm warning for spoilers, this is a big spoiler warning, Cave is killed, which kind of sends both Cora and Nicola, who had developed somewhat of a rapport with Cave, both into kind of a depression. Cora, so we're starting off this book with kind of the aftermath of that. They've basically restrained Nicola. A year and a half has passed. They've restrained Nicola. Cora's gone back to college because that's what she thinks Cave would have wanted him to do. Her and Ampersand have left the United States and are now living in Japan. Basically because of all the problems they've had with the US government, they basically sought asylum in another country. Cora's been given lots of implants as Ampersand is trying to experiment with her to see if she can learn the high speech that their race uses. Cave had a mentor, a woman named Paris Wells, who he left a bunch of stuff to, including his journals. She wants access to Nicola, which the CIA surprisingly grants her. And she gets Cora to speak with her again because she feels Cave would have wanted her to. The two of them, kind of get together. But there's other things going on in the background. There are other incidents that are involving aliens, but it takes a while to figure out what they are. It turns out that it's the sister species of what they refer to as a superorganism. Ampersand's race and Nicola's race. Humans have nicknamed the amygdalans, but they call themselves a superorganism. They have a sister race called the Fisterines, which they have a long, violent history with. They basically attack each other wherever they encounter each other. So the fact that there are Fisterines on Earth does not bode well. And the story sort of goes through that history a bit. We learn a bit of Ampersand's backstory. Nicola is still in a deep depression. He essentially wants to commit suicide. The amygdalan race, the superorganism race, they live for centuries. And they basically pre-decide when they choose to die. They don't necessarily die of old age. They choose the date of their death. And Nicola has basically decided he wants to do that, but he's not necessarily in his right mind, so people aren't allowing him to. He's not happy about that. They've taken away a lot of the things that would allow him to do damage to himself and others, but he still manages to find ways to do it. Paris does get Nicola to open up after a year and a half of not speaking to anyone. And yeah, I think things progress. I think that's about all I'm going to say for spoilers for the story. That's pretty much as is on the back cover. I've paraphrased and expanded and said different things. As the third book in the series, I think I enjoyed this book the most. And I think some of it has to do with Cora, the main character. Although we do see from Paris Wells' point of view from time to time. And Saul Kaplan makes a reappearance, the CIA agent who was Cora's initial liaison in the first book. In the first book, Cora was like, just like a whiny 20-something girl. You know, she had no drive, no ambition. She really just kind of floundered through her life, kind of complaining. She was kind of annoying, an annoying 20-something young woman. And as much as I enjoyed the first book a lot, I didn't really like Cora as a character. In the second book, she's had some traumatic experiences and she kind of falls further down into depression, but, you know, you kind of get a feeling as to why. You know, I'm a bit more sympathetic in the second book. You know, this book is the first time I've actually really liked her as an individual. That doesn't mean she's perfect. You know, she still is going through a lot. She still has a lot of, you know, issues to deal with. But having seen what she's gone through in the first two books, I am more sympathetic. You know, I can understand why she has problems. Whereas in the first book, whatever problems she had were in the background. There were things that existed before we meet her. And so, you know, there's less, it's harder to be compassionate for her and to be understanding for her. So, and they're also semi-normal things. She, you know, in the first book, we find out she had a father who basically abandoned the family because of his own arrogance, essentially. You know, he leaked government secrets to kind of like, haha, look, I've leaked government secrets. Had to flee the country. He's really just very manipulative and self-serving and arrogant. These are normal things. Yes, they will screw up your childhood, but, you know, again, I made it a bit hard to sympathize with her. Whereas, you know, the trauma she's experienced over the course of the series makes me more sympathetic to her. You know, I can sympathize with her more. One of the criticisms that I have heard about this book and about Cora's story arc is that, you know, she found it difficult to heal from the trauma that she had in the previous books. She seems to bounce back pretty quickly in this one. You know, doesn't spend as much time, you know, beating herself up over little things and just being depressed, and she bounces back pretty quick. That's a valid criticism. It's a bit of a switch for her. You could attribute it to character growth as an individual, but it's a bit of a switch that maybe you could criticize the books for. You know, she's not as depressed. Still really enjoyed the book. The book's ending wraps things up pretty tightly and fairly neatly. I don't know if there's going to be a fourth book. There's certainly enough open ends to write a fourth book. Whether Lindsay Ellis decides to do that or not, I'm not sure. But there's certainly material there. There's certainly stuff there that she could. I don't know if she intends to be a trilogy or a quartet or an ongoing series. I don't know if there's enough material to mine for an ongoing series, but there's definitely enough in here from where we left off for enough open things to do that they could make a fourth story out of. I think Lindsay Ellis's writing has improved also. You know, granted, you know, the first book was a debut novel. This is her third book. She's had more practice. So one can, I guess, expect that maybe she's gotten better. Yeah, I know I haven't spoiled very much aside from the, you know, stuff that happens in the second book. In my own rambling way, if you like a good science fiction, this is alternate history. If you haven't read the first books, this doesn't take place in the current era exactly, and it, you know, doesn't follow our history completely. It's an alternate timeline. based on First Contact. And another thing I did like about the series so far, if I can make one more little side element, is that the reactions of society as a whole, as you know, in general, the way the governments react, the way the public reacts to the discovery that there are aliens on the planet and the government has been hiding them, I find that very realistic. I don't know if I've mentioned that in the previous 2 reviews of the other 2 books, but I felt it was worth mentioning now. So, having said all that, as always, thanks for watching. As always, this stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.